human nature being what it is, they will abuse power. The founding fathers understood this. So we're going to bring in an era of accountability to the federal establishment, and that's going to make a big difference for people's freedoms.
Hey everyone, this is Will Witt. I'm here with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, presidential candidate. Thank you so much for joining me today.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. So, the biggest thing that I see happening right now online when I'm going on Twitter and talking to people that I don't see a lot of other conservative personalities talking to you about is a lot of the arguments that many of the MAGA people will say that you are controlled by the Bushes and the Cheneys, that you are a rhino, that this is the real reason why you're running. I'd like to kind of put those things to rest once and for all. What is your response to that?
Well, it's just totally fabricated. I mean, I have the boldest record of any elected Republican in the country. I mean, how many establishment Republicans would send troops to the southern border? How many establishment Republicans would ban transgender surgeries for minors? How many establishment Republicans would eliminate critical race theory from our K through 12 schools? How many establishment Republicans would have been willing to fund transportation for illegal aliens to go to Martha's Vineyard? How many establishment Republicans would have done the constitutional carry for Second Amendment or the heartbeat bill? So it just flies in the face of everything that we've ever done for our record. And oh, by the way, I mean, I've been fighting the Republican establishment my whole career, including as a founding member of the Freedom Caucus. We showed how it's done in Florida. We came in, we drained this swamp here in Florida, and the state's never done better as a result. And we won a victory that no Republican governor candidate has ever achieved in the history of the state of Florida.
So to the people who make those claims, they make it so much. Why do you think that they say these things? Is there a reasoning behind it, or do they really think that?
I don't think they think it. I think that we have a strand in our party that views supporting Trump as whether you are a rhino or not. And so you could be the most conservative person since sliced bread. Unless you're kissing his rear end, they will somehow call you a rhino. So it's been totally detached from principle and what you actually believe and results. And it's more about, just what faction you happen to do. So there'll be people who are huge Trump supporters, like in Congress, who have like incredibly liberal left-wing records that's really just atrocious. And yet they're viewed as by some of these folks as like really, really good. Then you have other people, like a Congressman Chip Roy, who's endorsed me, Congressman Thomas Massey. These guys have records of principle fighting the swamp that are second to none. And yet they will be attacked by some of these people and called rhinos. So it's just been totally detached from any type of substance. And ultimately, a movement can't be about the personality of one individual. The movement has got to be about what are you trying to achieve on behalf of the American people. And that's got to be based in principle. Because if you're not rooted in principle, if all we are is listless vessels that's just supposed to follow, whatever happens to come down the pike on Truth Social every morning, that's not going to be a durable movement.
Thomas Massey wants to legalize raw milk. I love that guy. When you talk about your record here in Florida, obviously you had a lot of Republicans here who supported a lot of the things that you were doing. In Washington, D.C., it's a little bit different than that. The swamp is a lot deeper. In 2016, Trump ran on the fact that he was going to drain the swamp. How do you plan to actually take that down if you were to get into office?
Well, first, we will run and we will win a clear-cut victory. We will expand Republican majorities in the House, and we will have a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate. So that gives us an opportunity to do a lot legislatively, and we'll be ready on day one, because you really only get certain times to strike while the iron's hot with Congress. You could serve 2 terms as president, but you don't have a full 8 years to really capitalize on the moment. And when you get in, that first 150 days is really the best time to capitalize. And I think we're going to be ready to go on day one. We're going to know what we can do through Senate, for example, this budget reconciliation. We only need 50 votes. So we're thinking through all of those things now, and we're going to be ready. So that's the first thing. Second of all, you've got to have good personnel. You could have the best ideas as an executive. You can make the best decisions. If you don't have a bunch of people that are going to be there with you in the trenches and that are going to really take on the entrenched bureaucracy, they're going to eat you up. So we're going to have thousands of people ready to go, send to the Senate for confirmation, and then you've got to be willing to clean house. Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp, but yet he kept Christopher Wray in to the end of his term. He didn't fire Fauci. When he had opportunities to really make an impact on upending that swamp, he didn't do it. So we're gonna do it. Like on day one, you're gonna have a new FBI director. I mean, we are going to take DOJ and FBI. You're going to see major changes there. You're going to see major changes to the medical swamp, things like the FDA, the CDC, and those agencies failed this country during COVID. We're going to bring a reckoning to all of that. We're also going to be wielding our Article 2 power to ensure that this government is back under the current, under the written constraints of the Constitution, because this bureaucracy that's developed is supposed to be answering to the president, but they really have a mind of their own. And that is not what the founding fathers intended. So reconstitutionalizing the federal government, I think, is going to be one of the top tasks for the next president. And that's why you have things like weaponization of the FBI and DOJ, because they haven't been held accountable. Power has accumulated. Human nature being what it is, they will abuse power. The founding fathers understood this. So we're going to bring in an era of accountability to the federal establishment, and that's going to make a big difference for people's freedoms.
Well, I think it's important to talk about the CDC, the NIH. I mean, ever since Fauci's been in for decades now in the NIH, people have gotten way more unhealthy in the United States than they've really ever been before. And one of the things for me, back in 2016, back in 2020, I was all about Trump, doing all of these things for Trump. I spoke at the Stop the Steal rallies. I was all over it. And for me, when it came down to COVID, it seemed to be Trump's stance on the COVID vaccines that for me was my biggest issue. And as I was in 2021, 2022, posting about the vaccines and the mandates and the efficacy of them, it seemed like a lot of Republican voters were really on board with what I was saying, that these are untested, we don't know what they're doing, and now they're trying to mandate it. And it didn't seem like Donald Trump aligned with my message and what I believed about that. What is your response to, first of all, I guess, Trump's statements on the vaccine and what you would do differently moving forward?
Well, you have to follow the evidence. So what did they tell us on these vaxes? They said, if you take this, you will not get COVID. That is false. And then they said that there's nothing to worry about in terms of any type of side effects, but it had not been studied enough. And you go watch a typical pharmaceutical commercial, first 15 seconds, usually like a couple in their 50s or 60s kind of smiling, hugging each other. Oh, this drug's so great. Then the next 15 seconds is, you could die, you could have a stroke. And they list all the potential side effects, but yet we're supposed to believe that there was nothing with an mRNA COVID shot that hadn't even been tested. And so, in Florida, we ban vaccine passports. We ban vaccine employer mandates, including from the private sector. There were other Republicans that were attacking me for that, like businesses should be able to do what they want to do. But they were basically doing the bidding of Fauci and the CDC by imposing those employer mandates, and there was no scientific justification to do it. So I didn't want somebody to lose their job. You should not have to choose between a job you need and a shot you don't want. And so we made sure to come to people's rescue in the state of Florida. But what happened with the vaxes? The studies from Pfizer said 100% effective, all this stuff. By the time we got to the summer of 2021, you saw there were massive outbreaks. Even though we had tens of millions of people across this country, probably over 100 million, that had taken the shots, you still had big waves in the South, and then in the fall, you had big waves in the Midwest. And so that was failure. And people would go on Twitter, mostly liberals, and they would tweet, I just got diagnosed with COVID-19. I'm so thankful I took the vaccine. I'm like, wait a minute. If you took a measles vaccine and then you got measles, you wouldn't be thanking the measles shot. You would be upset that it didn't stop you from getting it. And so right then and there, you had a huge problem. So what we did in Florida, we started doubling down on treatments and early treatments. I set up all these sites so people could get monoclonal antibody treatments. And I was being attacked by the press saying that, oh, you're against vaccinations and everything like that. I said, people are getting infected. They're getting sick. What are we supposed to do? We're not supposed to help them. So we did that. Then I think what happened is it became more and more apparent that there were side effects from this, particularly for the people who are least in need of any vaccine, like young men 18 to 39 who were in good shape. So you saw a clear increase in things like myocarditis, and my Department of Health here in Florida has documented that. We're the only Department of Health in the country that recommended against COVID shots for minors. And our Surgeon General's recommended against the booster shots just generally at this point. We also convened a statewide grand jury to investigate the claims made and the performance of the COVID vaccine. So that's ongoing right now. It's secret, so I don't know exactly what's happened, but they've had people testify who did the vax and had adverse reactions. And so they're building a record on this. But I think if you look at what was claimed on these things and then what actually happened, that's a massive, massive gap. And we need to do something about it. There needs to be some accountability for that. And by the way, I'm a right to try guy. So like if there's something out there and you rush something to market, if somebody wants it, I say, let them, but don't act like that there's not risk for that, and never, never force it on somebody. And that's really what happened. I think the ruling class in this country decided to use the COVID jab as a way to coerce behavior. And a lot of the COVID restrictions, what ended up being the case with them, was less about stopping COVID and just more about controlling behavior. These people had an itch to control people's behaviors. And so I think the way that power was abused, where people were losing their jobs or having to actually take something they didn't want, that was one massive abuse of power in this country. And if you look at the performance of these vaccines, you cannot say it saved 100 million people. That is totally, utterly false.
Of course. I mean, right now, Pfizer is making $1,000 a second based off of these vaccines that they made. And one of the things that goes with that, you were talking about Republicans in Congress. You also got Democrats in Congress. All of these people are taking money from big pharma and these different organizations, these different companies. And I think people, especially a lot of people my age, around 20 to 30 years old, are apathetic towards politics because they see so many of these politicians just controlled by these big corporate interests. Going into, if you become president, what is your plan on taking down these big corporate interests who are essentially infesting our Congress, our halls of our politicians?
Well, I think the biggest place where that's happening is in the bureaucracy, because you'll have people like NIH that are making massive amounts of money on royalties from big pharma. You have people at the FDA that they know their next job is going to be working for big pharma. So when Pfizer presents an application to approve a COVID jab for a 6-month-old baby on an emergency use basis, even though there wasn't adequate data for that, man, those people in the FDA, they have an incentive to want to approve that because, 2, 3, 5 years down the road, they're likely going to be working at these places. And so you really have a revolving door that's happened. So we're going to shut that down entirely because what's happened is things like the FDA, they really have become an arm of big pharma, and that's not healthy. And the way that the big pharmaceutical companies affect medical practice generally, and this is something that, it's not like I would have said that this was crazy to say 5 years ago, but seeing it up close with COVID, the way physicians really just respond to the signals from big pharma, it's incredible the amount of power that they're wielding. So our healthcare system really has big pharma, big insurance, and big government. It's kind of like an iron triangle. The patient is in the back of the bus, the physician is in the back of the bus, and the whole thing that's supposed to drive healthcare, this doctor-patient relationship, is really something that just gets overwhelmed by those big interests. So you're going to see major changes at CDC, you're going to see major changes at NIH, and you're going to see major changes at the FDA. I think that there's issues in Congress, but I think that post-COVID, I do think a lot of those congressmen are going to look at some of these issues a little bit differently because it just wasn't the same prior to COVID in terms of how people viewed a lot of the stuff that's going on. I think this has caused a lot of people to wake up, and I think there's a lot of sensitivity to ensuring that they're just not deferring, to the largest pharmaceutical companies, if they're actually doing things that are in the best interest of the American people.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the FDA is basically like me owning the rehab center and the liquor store that are right next door to each other. Switching gears, going towards the debates next week, it's basically what it seems like is going to be all of those people on that stage against you. How do you plan to attack this, and how do you plan to defend yourself from the things that are going to happen on that stage?
Oh, we'll be ready. This is not anything that's unusual. From the time I won re-election in Florida, I had the bullseye on me. I'm attacked by the President of the United States. I'm attacked by the Vice President. I'm attacked by the corporate liberal media. I'm attacked by all the other Republican candidates. And I think I'm the only person in the race that can say that. There's been more money spent attacking me than has been spent against both Biden and Trump combined so far in this election, and that's pretty incredible. So we expect that we're going to be taking flack, but you know what? That's what happens when you're over the target. The good news is I have a record of unquestioned success in Florida, and I have a vision to be able to reverse this country's decline that our voters agree with. And it's going to be compelling. So I say bring it on, and we'll get it done.
What do you think is the biggest challenge facing your campaign today?
Well, look, I think that I'm in a situation where I'm being hammered on all sides, and that's fine. Like, I'm not complaining about it, but the corporate media, they are not going to do anything to try to help me. I mean, I'm the guy they don't want to be the nominee because they know I'll beat Biden. They know I'll actually get all this stuff done. So you need to be able to deliver your message to individual voters in an as unfiltered way as possible. These debates do give you an opportunity to do it. I don't know how many people are going to watch, but I'd say probably about 10 million, maybe up to 20 million. Who knows? That's a great opportunity. A lot of those voters have never seen me in action before. They probably have heard of me, maybe they've seen photos, whatever, maybe clips, but this will be the first time that they get to see and render a judgment. And that's one of the reasons we're on the ground in places like Iowa and New Hampshire, because we want to deliver that message directly to voters. I did a town hall with WMUR, which is their local affiliate in New Hampshire. There's probably about 30 people in the audience. And afterwards, a bunch of these guys came up to me like, man, you're really good. You're nothing like what the media says about you. I was like, well, do you think the media is going to be honest? They're like, yeah, we know. But still, when you see the difference between a guy that has got a great vision, is in command of what needs to happen, has a great record, versus kind of how they try to characterize it, they're like, it's a big difference. And so our challenge is just to everyone in these primaries know about my bio, my family, my accomplishments, and my vision for the country. And if they all know that, we're going to do very well. But we're not going to get any help in that process. The corporate press is not going to do that. This debate, we could go out there and be Abraham Lincoln, give the Gettysburg Address, and the media is not going to say we did a good job. I mean, we know that going in. We know how they're going to spin it. So we just need to make the connection with the person watching TV at home.
Well, they're trying to tear down Abraham Lincoln statues these days.
Well, exactly.
So,
I mean, so it's sad. But that's part of the issue is people feel it. Our country is in decline. It doesn't mean we're not a great country, we have a great history, but we're frittering away a great inheritance of liberty that so many people have fought for. And you see it in the economy. Middle-income families who are doing everything right, they're falling behind. A lot of them can't even afford a new house or a car, juggling grocery bills. You look at what's happening at our border, how humiliating it is for a country to have the Mexican drug cartels controlling our own southern border, and they're killing tens of thousands of people. I was down at the border a couple months ago. I met with a mother named Tracy whose son died from a fentanyl overdose. He thought he was taking a Percocet. It was laced with fentanyl and dead. And that is happening all across this country because of the negligence of the federal government and the Biden regime. And then, of course, all the COVID problems with the medical authoritarianism. We never had infringements on our freedoms to that level in my lifetime. And yet nobody's been held accountable for that. So we're going to do it. We look at our military strength. We're running out of ammunition. We're running low on weapons. We have recruiting is at an all-time low post-Vietnam draft. That is not going to be something that's going to be able to stand up to China. And then we see these agencies that are off the rails, like the DOJ and the FBI, that have become weaponized. So you see all that, and you're like, man, we need a new direction. We've got to reverse this slide, because if we don't reverse this slide, we're going to be in a really, really deep hole. It's going to be very difficult to climb out of it. So people see that, they get that, and I think they know how the media wants to muddy the water. So if you just are out there speaking the truth, I do think it's powerful. We showed that in Florida because we had a lot of hostility from the media throughout my time as governor and even till today. And so nationally it's the same thing. But the truth will set you free. When people hear that, they do respond to it.
And I think to bring it all around there, to go back to people my age, it seems even more, it's bigger than politics, it's bigger than the economy. There's kind of a want that a lot of young people have for something different in this country, something that they feel like they are craving, that they need, a sort of meaning or purpose. You know what I'm talking about? How do we instill that sense of real America, that real sense of purpose and reverence on young people today if you were to become president?
Well, one of the things I do want to do is restore a sense of civic pride. And we want people to be proud to be Americans again. And I think that will come when they see that our national leaders, from the president on down, are actually putting them and their concerns first. We need to recognize that everything we do has got to be for the benefit of the American people. We shouldn't be worried about Wall Street. We shouldn't be worried about foreign countries before we're worried about our own people. And so you'll see that with me. I think people will see a lot of vitality in the White House. We will be delivering a very strong message, and it's going to be a message that we're going to have really, really big reforms in this country. And I think we're going to give young people better opportunities going forward as a result. Because that's the way it's going now. The younger generation is probably going to have less opportunities than my generation or my parents' generation. And we've really never had that in America, where we're turning over a country with less opportunities than what we inherited. And so we can't let that happen.
No. Well, it's an honor to speak with you today. Thank you
Thanks
so much for this. Make sure that you guys, if you like this video, make sure you share with your friends. Comment your thoughts down below. Make sure you pre-order my new book, Do Not Comply, at the link down below. Thank you so much, Governor Ron DeSantis. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.